The more real, the more violent an activity is, the less you'll be able to engage in that activity on a repetitive basis. So meaning like a police officer that's engaged in a gunfight, that's very dangerous, very real, and you'll be lucky if you even survive one time, during one gunfight. But if you have 2 gunfights, 3 gunfights, sooner or later you're gonna die. In real warfare, the military engaging in real live war, it's extremely dangerous. There's no room for mistakes. You get shot, you're dead. You can't engage in war too often because you will die. The gangsters that live out, that run the streets, constantly dealing with guns and drugs, is very real out there, and the more confrontations they engage in, the more chance that they will die at an early age. So now we step into, say we go street fighting, unarmed combat. The more that you engage in that, the more chance that you will destroy your health and basically receive serious injury that could be lethal. So for example, not too long ago, there's somebody in this area that got beat down by bats, and he ended up in the hospital for a few months, and he was in critical condition. He was lucky to even survive, but even after surviving, I believe half his body is paralyzed still, and he will never make a full recovery from that incident. Now that's extremely dangerous, and the body cannot handle such extreme dangers. That's the reality of real life survival. Now when you go into the entertainment business, looking at combat sport for example, or the other areas of sports that are used for entertainment, the safer that a sport is, the more they're going to be able to engage in that activity on a repetitive basis. So you look at sports like golf, bowling, billiards, extremely safe. They could play hundreds of games in a year and play for many years. Play 30 years and play hundreds of games every year. That shows how safe that sport is. Now you get into more sports that require more impact, such as soccer or basketball. Not as safe as golf or billiards or bowling, but basketball players could play over 82 games a year, and then they could play in the playoffs. There's so many games that they could play in a year, and their careers may last 15 years, 20 years. Look at the game of tennis, kind of similar to basketball. Look at the game of soccer, kind of similar to basketball. So you got soccer, you got tennis, you got basketball, all relatively around the same as far as how the longevity of an athlete and how long they're going to be able to play day after day, because it's not that dangerous compared to the even higher impact sports, such as, now we're going to go into football and boxing. Football is dangerous. I don't know exactly how many games they play in a season, but they clearly do not play as many games as basketball players, because it's very hard on the body. Even the Super Bowl is only 1 game. It's not 7 games, potentially 7 games like how it is in basketball, because it's just too rough on the body. And that is a clear fact that football is more dangerous than basketball. Now you got another sport that's very safe, which is baseball. They play over 100 games in a year, and the career of baseball players could last for a very long time. Baseball is safer than basketball, safer than soccer. Alright, so you got things such as football that are extremely dangerous, but they still manage to play longer. Um, it's not as dangerous as boxing. Okay, boxing is more dangerous than football. I mean, you're directly receiving punishment and damage to your face and your head, getting head trauma. So boxers, their careers cannot last that long. I believe Mayweather might be 50 fights, 50-0, which is a very long career, for boxers. But you look at somebody like Muhammad Ali, they might get about 30 fights and then that's it. You know what I mean? Around 50 fights and your career is over. Alright? Now we're getting even more dangerous. In America, what they call the MMA, the cage fighting, you see the more dangerous it gets, the less that they can fight. So you see these cage fighters, they might only have 20 fights, 30 fights, and their career is going to be over. Right? So the more dangerous it gets, the less that you could fight. So if you have people that are fighting like the samurai, they're engaging in real life and death fighting with swords. They're challenging each other with swords. You know, the possibility of you lasting for 10 fights is very minimal. You'd be lucky to even last the first fight and not die. And then the second fight, third fight, I mean, you could win 2 in a row and then die in the third one. Win 3 in a row, die in the fourth one. Or you could just die in the first one. Because that's how dangerous it is. You're talking about real swords. You know, so talking about a gunfight is even more dangerous than sword fighting. You know, it's just anything could happen. You'd be lucky to survive 1 gunfight, much less 2. You know, I mean, Tupac survived 1. The second one came around, he couldn't survive it. Malcolm X, John F. Kennedy didn't survive it at all. 50 Cent survived 1 gunfight. I think he got shot like 9 times, and he's still alive. But to survive a gunfight it's unlikely. You know, you'd be lucky to survive 1, because that's how real it is. Talking about real street fighting, you're talking about permanent damage. You know, you're talking about no gloves, no rules, no, weapons, multiple people. You know, surviving a street fight is something that's going to be very hard in the body, just like what happened with that one person. He ended up getting paralyzed. Or you losing your teeth, severely damaging your brain. So basically, the more dangerous it is, the less that you're going to be able to repeat that engagement. You know, so I see that a real martial artist trains for the reality, but he doesn't want to be engaged in reality. He doesn't want to be involved in a gunfight. Doesn't want to be involved in a sword fight. Doesn't want to be involved in a real fight. But he trains to be prepared, that in case in case it happens, he's the most prepared that he can be to survive that situation, which could turn in any direction at any time. But he doesn't aim to be involved in that reality of fighting, because it is very brutal, it is very lethal, it is very dangerous. Even though I speak so heavily against combat sport and cage fighting, it's extremely dangerous, but it's not nearly as dangerous as real fighting on the streets, or real fighting with weapons, with swords and nunchucks and sticks and multiple opponents and baseball bats and bricks and bottles and guns, and it's not nearly as dangerous as that. That's why they're able to engage in multiple fights. But even in that cage, it is very dangerous. That's why they can't last that long. And these boxers that are able to engage in more fights than the cage fighter, it's showing that, hey, it's not, the boxing is not as dangerous as the cage fighting, but of course it is still very dangerous. And then you put boxing next to football. Football is not as dangerous as boxing, but football in itself is still very dangerous. Now you got something like the Taekwondo point sparring or the karate point sparring is not as dangerous as football or boxing, or, and clearly, of course, cage fighting. I just feel that people, they should make more intelligent decisions on what they put their bodies through. But obviously, no matter what I say, people are still going to do what they want to do. For example, cage fighting could be likened to smoking crack. And then boxing could be likened to being an alcoholic and just drinking way too much alcohol. Football could be likened to, I don't know what other drugs are out there that people abuse, but it could be likened to something like weed or something like that. You know, I mean, people will abuse their bodies the way that they want to abuse it. You know, and I can't stop the people, but I just want the people that want to be intelligent to make more intelligent decisions in life. The way that I view it is like cage fighting is almost like, it's like being promiscuous and just sleeping around without, you know, freely. You know, and then you sleep around, next thing you know, you get HIV. You don't necessarily die when you're having sex at that moment, but once you catch that disease, it's in your body and it's not going away, and then you end up dying an early death. That's how I see cage fighting to be. You may not die in the cage at that moment, but all that impact that you take into your brain, all that head trauma, will result in your early death. You know, you fight in 20 fights. You might not have died in that cage, but instead of dying at the age of 80, you end up dying at the age of 45 because of all that head trauma. So it's like HIV, you know, you have all the sex, everything's all great, you don't die exactly when you're having sex, but instead of dying at the age of 80, you end up dying at the age of 40 because of HIV. You know, so I see that people have to really sit back and realize how dangerous this is. And clearly, you know, you could see my outline of my, you know, how I'm describing these sports and how it's just leading to more and more danger. And obviously, if these people cannot engage in this type of activity day in and day out, is obviously not safe. You can never argue with me and say that cage fighting is just as safe as baseball. You can't say that cage fighting is just as safe as bowling, or cage fighting is just as safe as soccer. No, it is clearly extremely violent and an unhealthy way of entertaining the people. You know, but of course there is a lot more violence. That's, you know, it's a lot more violent than the cage fighting when you step into real fighting. You know, but it's just a very unintelligent way to generate income. I say that women having sex for money are better off than the cage fighters. You know, you know, it's safer than what the cage fighters are doing. Or even men having sex for money, having gay sex for money is safer than what the cage fighters are doing. I would argue and say that. You know, people should find other ways of making money. I think that if they're more intelligent, that's what they'll do. You know, someone like 50 Cent, I'm not a fan of his, but I think that he's smart and intelligent with the way that he makes money. He doesn't need the cage fight. He raps to make millions of dollars. Then he gets all these, you know, record deals and sponsorships, and now he's acting in all these movies, making money. He's making millions of dollars, and he doesn't even have to fight, like, physically. He's just creating art and entertaining people in different ways. You got somebody like Michael Jackson, who made millions of dollars and became worldly famous, didn't have to physically fight anybody. He's expressing his talent on stage, and people loved him for doing that. I feel that people need to be more intelligent if they want money, if they want women, there's other ways to do it, more intelligent ways. You know, like I said, Michael Jackson had all these women, all this money, didn't have to step into fight anybody. Elvis Presley had all these women, all this money, didn't have to physically fight anybody. You know, I feel that people just need to exercise greater intelligence. Figure out exactly what you're looking for. You're looking for money, you're looking for fame, you're looking for recognition. Well, there's other ways to do it. That's what I see. You know, I mean, even boxers are smarter than the cage fighters. Someone like Mayweather is smarter than the cage fighters. Mayweather, I heard, is making $50 million in just one boxing match. Just one boxing match. Where these cage fighters will never make nearly as much as that for their whole career. And I've heard that he fights very smart, doesn't allow himself to get too many, you know, allow the person to get too many headshots on him. That's why he's able to win 50 fights in a row. And these cage fighters are just not being smart with the way that they're fighting. They keep getting bashed in the head constantly. Their faces are looking like a bloody marshmallow. And they clearly are not good at what they do when they're so, when their faces are so destroyed. They're just not intelligent people. And I don't believe that the audience, the people should be inspired and led by unintelligent people. I think that we should look up to people that are actually intelligent and that could help better our lives. I feel that back in the day when people were admiring Bruce Lee, it was much better for society because he was actually an intelligent person and a wise person. He wasn't just talented in fighting, he was talented in many areas of life. But nowadays people are just so one-sided and they just know how to fight and that's all they could do. And then they have a huge following when I don't believe that they deserve this following, because they're not leading people towards intelligence. They're leading people towards ignorance and further destruction. And it's sad that this is where the society is headed, but I think that maybe people could just sit back and open their eyes, and then they could basically wake up and make some smart decisions for themselves. And when they make some smart decisions, it could influence other people around them, their friends, their family, or maybe even their children. You know, because if you make it, you know, if you put effort to not look up to these cage fighters, it's almost like putting effort to not be an alcoholic. So then your child will not become an alcoholic himself, and your child will not become a cage fighter himself because you encouraged him to be one. You know, I think that the decisions that we make in our lives are very important, and we should make better decisions for our lives. And that's kind of what I just wish to promote to people.